You'll die. Poor my daughter-in-law mocked me, so I bought a mansion to silence her. The sound of crystal clinking echoed under the golden light of chandeliers. Edward's 38th birthday had turned the grand restaurant into a theater of wealth and status. Waiters in white gloves moved silently, refilling glasses of champagne, while guests laughed lightly at each other's jokes, their voices mixing with the faint notes of live piano in the corner. At the head of the table sat my son Edward, handsome in a tailored suit, his tie gleaming silk, his posture perfect. To his right, perched like a queen, was Britney, his wife, my daughter-in-law. Every hair in her sleek blonde bun had been disciplined into place, her red lips glistening under the lights. She looked like a woman who had everything, and she believed she had the right to everything. In front of me lay a neat stack of papers. The pen atop it glinted like a dagger. Britney pushed it toward me with the grace of a predator, her smile carved in ice. "Sign it, Clara," she said softly, though her words were sharp enough to slice the air. "This is the best nursing home we could find for you. At least you won't have to spend the rest of your life in that crumbling little apartment of yours. You'll be comfortable. Comfortable." The word landed like an insult, like a knife wrapped in silk. My fingers trembled over the table. Not from weakness, not from age, but from rage, cold, controlled, and rising like a storm. I turned to my son, the boy I had raised alone, the man for whom I had sacrificed youth, sleep, and dreams. "Edward," I whispered so low only he could hear. His jaw tightened, his fork scraped against porcelain. But he did not look up. His eyes stayed locked on the steak in front of him as if I no longer existed. My throat tightened, but I forced my voice steady. "I will not sign. Not today. Not ever." Britney laughed, then a brittle, cutting laugh that echoed louder than the music, sharper than the clinking of crystal. "Then wait," she sneered. "Wait until you die, poor and alone. Because no one, Clara, no one wants to carry a useless burden." Her words spread across the table like poison. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The chandelier above blurred, the music became distant, and I could hear only my own heartbeat pounding against my ribs like fists. Edward remained silent. My son, the boy who once clung to me after school, who once whispered secrets into my ear as I tucked him into bed, now sat cold, immovable, silent. That was the night my family died. When I returned to my small apartment, the silence swallowed me whole. I sat in the armchair that had belonged to Arthur, my late husband, and let the tears come until they dried on my cheeks. For hours, I stared at the wall, at the faded pictures, at the worn curtains, and felt the weight of loneliness pressing down. But inside that weight, a spark ignited. They thought I was poor. They thought I was helpless. They thought I had nothing left. They were wrong. Because hidden in the back of my drawer was the truth papers Arthur and I had kept, savings we had guarded, investments we had built with discipline and sacrifice. I had lived simply frugally, not because I had no choice, but because I wanted to see if Edward would love me for who I was, not for what I had. Now I knew the answer. The next morning, I brewed black coffee, strong, bitter, exactly the way Arthur loved it. As I sipped, I spread the documents across the table, deeds, accounts, passbooks. Numbers glowed back at me, investments carefully nurtured. More than $1 million. Arthur had left me everything. My lips curled into a faint smile. I whispered, "Oh, Arthur, they think they know me, but they have no idea." That afternoon, the phone rang. Edward's voice was measured, practiced. "Mom, Britney feels guilty. She wants to apologize. We'd like to invite you to dinner." I laughed. A low, humorless sound. "Calling me poor? Telling me I'll die alone. That's your idea of guilt." "Mom, she only wants the best for you." He stammered. "I'll think about it," I said, and hung up. My next call was to Catherine Pierce, our old family attorney. She had been a sharp-eyed woman even back then, and years had not dulled her edge. "Clara, it's been too long." "What's happened? I need to change my will, Catherine." I said, each word deliberate. "Edward and Britney will inherit nothing. Not 1 cent. I want it made official." There was a pause, heavy as if Catherine weighed the depth of my resolve. "Then, if that's what you want, I'll prepare everything. We'll do it properly." And for the first time in years, I felt my spine straighten. 3 weeks later, I walked into the marble foyer of a house that took my breath away. A mansion, arched windows, a sweeping staircase, lawns green as emerald. The lake at the back shimmered under the afternoon sun. It was more than a house, it was a statement. I stood at the doorway, keys cold in my hand, and whispered, "Arthur, I'm home." For a long moment I didn't move. I let the silence wrap around me, not heavy this time, but liberating. This wasn't an empty house. It was freedom. That night, I lit every lamp in the mansion, flooding the rooms with golden light. I brewed tea, sat in the high-backed chair by the window, and for the first time in years, I felt something stir in me. Not just survival, triumph. A week later, Edward and Britney arrived. The crunch of tires on gravel echoed like a warning. Britney stepped out of a sleek BMW, her white dress hugging her frame, her lipstick blood red. She looked around with wide eyes, and for a moment I thought I saw awe. But then her lips curled into that same sly smile. "This house. It's perfect for a young family like ours," she cooed as she walked through the halls, her heels clicking against marble. "This room would be a beautiful nursery. That one could be Edward's office. And you, Clara, you can take the master suite. We'll take care of you." Her tone dripped with false sweetness. Her eyes flicked across the chandeliers, the furniture, the polished floors. Not once did she ask what I wanted. In her mind, the house was already theirs. We sat in the living room, tea steaming between us. Britney leaned forward, her hands clasped. "Clara, it's lonely to live by yourself. Edward and I have decided we'll move in here. You won't have to worry about bills, cleaning, anything. Family should live together." Edward nodded quietly, as if the decision were already sealed. I placed my teacup down carefully. I looked at them both, long and steady, and I realized then their greed was not just hunger. It was entitlement. They believed they deserved everything simply because of blood and marriage. I smiled faintly. "You're right," I said softly. "Family should take care of one another. But excuse me, I need to make a call." I walked into the study, closed the door, and dialed Catherine. "Catherine, add another clause. Write it in bold if you have to. Edward and Britney will never inherit this house. Never." On the other side of the door, laughter drifted faintly from the living room. They thought they had won. They thought the mansion was already theirs. But the game had only just begun. The rain fell in thick gray sheets, drumming against the windows of the mansion. I was just about to turn off the lights in the sunroom when the buzzer shrieked through the quiet house. It was nearly 10 at night. My stomach knotted as I glanced at the security screen. There she was, Britney standing under a black umbrella, her white dress gleaming ghost-like against the storm. Her makeup was immaculate, her smile unnervingly calm. Beside her stood a man in a gray suit, his face blank, empty, unreadable. I pressed the intercom. "What do you want at this hour?" Her voice was icy, dripping false concern. "We need to talk about your well-being. Clara." She tilted her chin toward the man. "This is a specialist." The word well-being from her lips sounded like property. My jaw tightened. "I don't take visitors at night." Britney's smile widened. "Then I'll say it plainly. You are not mentally stable, and we have a witness." My chest constricted. I gripped the counter to steady myself, but my voice came out firm. "If you don't leave, I'll call 911. And my lawyer." "Do whatever you like," she said with a shrug, her voice dripping disdain. Tomorrow we'll file with family court. For your own safety. This house will no longer be yours. She raised her hand, signaling the man to jot something on his clipboard. Lightning split the sky behind them, and for a moment their silhouettes looked monstrous predators ready to devour. I disconnected the intercom and immediately dialed Catherine. Her voice, sharp and alert, cut through the static. Don't open the gate. Record everything. Turn on the garden lights. I obeyed. Floodlights snapped on, slicing the rain into white shards. Britney straightened her posture, tilting her umbrella as if posing for a camera. The man raised his phone, recording. But so did I. The gate camera, the porch camera, the hallway camera all blinked red, capturing every frame. Finally, after half an hour, Britney turned her heels, splashing against puddles, the stranger trailing behind. Not retreating in defeat, but postponing, calculating. I exhaled slowly, the storm outside no louder than the storm inside me. They wanted me silenced. They wanted me erased. But I was not going anywhere. By dawn, Catherine was at my door, shaking the rain from her coat. She carried a folder and a thermos of strong coffee. We're going to step 2, she said. Her eyes glinted like steel. A temporary restraining order against Britney, and a healthcare proxy. From now on, Silver Circle will represent you in emergencies. That way, she can't claim you're incompetent. I nodded, relief and steel mingling inside me. Every new paper, every signature felt like a lock against the wolves scratching at my door. Days later, Edward called. His voice was strained, hesitant. Mom, Britney told me you locked her out. She said something about an evaluation. She showed up at my house in the middle of the night with a stranger, I said calmly. Should I have let them in? On the other end, silence. Then Edward sighed. I know she pushes too hard. But maybe you could protect myself. I cut him off. That's exactly what I'm doing. He murmured, I feel caught in the middle. Don't stay in the middle, Edward, I said firmly. The middle is where people get trampled. The following morning, Edward came alone. Not in a suit this time, but in a plain blue shirt, sleeves rolled up. He sat at the long dining table, shoulders slumped. I placed a folder before him. One by one, I laid out the documents, the restraining order, the healthcare proxy, the no contest clause, the recorded transcripts of the stormy night. He read silently, his jaw tightening with each page. She's trying to weaponize the law against you. Yes, I said, my voice steady. But I've learned to fight in her language. Finally, he lifted his eyes to mine. Mom, if I had spoken up that night at the restaurant, would it have made a difference? A lump rose in my throat. I forced myself to answer evenly. We'll never know. But the first person you must speak up for is yourself. Edward dropped his gaze. I was afraid of losing my marriage. And you lost it anyway, I said quietly. Sometimes truth must be delivered plainly, like a knife cutting bread. But Britney was relentless. She resurfaced at the farmer's market. I had been choosing flowers when her perfume, sharp and artificial, cut through the air. She walked up, heels clicking, smile tight as glass. Think you've won, she murmured. She raised her phone, flashing the screen at me. A recording. My voice. Twisted, edited words spliced together into something ugly. I'll leak this, she hissed. Blogs will eat it up. The story of the heartless mother who disinherited her son. I looked her square in the eyes. Don't you feel any shame? Her red lips curled higher. Shame is for the poor. No, I said softly. Shame is for those who still remember who they are. Her eyes flickered just for a second before she turned and strutted away. That evening, I told Catherine. She didn't flinch. If she wants to play with media, we'll counter with truth. I have something for you. She handed me a weathered envelope, the edges yellowed with time. Arthur left this, she said gently. He told me to give it to you if you ever needed reminding of your worth. My hands trembled as I opened it. Arthur's handwriting flowed across the page. Choose those who stay for your voice, not your money. If you ever forget your own voice, open the house. The house will call you home. Tears blurred my vision. Arthur had known. He had prepared me. That night I sat in the glow of a single lamp, Arthur's words heavy and warm in my hands. For the first time, I understood the mansion wasn't just my refuge. It was meant to be more. A week later, Silver Circle contacted me. 3 elderly women need temporary shelter. Just 2 weeks, Mariah, their coordinator, said over the phone. One just discharged from the hospital, another thrown out by her daughter-in-law, and the third with nowhere to go. I stared at the roses in my garden, their petals trembling in the breeze. My heart pounded. Then I said, "Yes, send them. But I'll need help. We'll send volunteers," Mariah assured me. "And if any of your family wants to help, even better." Family. I almost laughed. But then a thought struck. Perhaps Edward still had a choice to make. The next morning, I sent him a message. "Do you have 2 weeks free?" When he arrived, his face was uncertain but open. I explained, "We have 3 guests coming. Alma frail but sharp-eyed. Ruth recovering from illness. Jean quiet, carrying her old radio everywhere. We're going to take care of them." To my surprise, Edward chuckled. "Then I guess I'll wash dishes, lift boxes, and if needed, change bandages." The house filled with life. Alma shuffled slowly, but her eyes sparkled. Ruth sang softly as she brewed tea, her voice husky but warm. Jean sat by the window, hugging her radio, tuning into old swing music. The mansion, once echoing with cold silence, now pulsed with voices, footsteps, laughter. At night, as rain tapped gently on the windows, I realized this was what Arthur had meant. This was what the house was for. But peace never lasts long. 2 weeks later, the buzzer shrieked again. This time, when I checked the camera, Britney's face filled the screen. Her voice rang out through the intercom, mocking. Clara still playing the benevolent saint, pathetic. "Edward, if you're in there, you're just her puppet." Edward stiffened beside me, his hand hovering over the button. I whispered, "It's your choice. But remember, never open the door if the price is your dignity." Edward pressed the intercom. "Go home, Britney." Her face twisted. "You'll regret this." "No," Edward said firmly, his voice calm, resolute. "Because for once, I'm standing in the right place." Outside, the storm raged, but inside, for the first time in years, I felt the warmth of family, not the one tied by blood, but the one forged by choice. The summons came 2 weeks later. A forged financial power of attorney had been submitted to my bank, complete with my shaky signature. They claimed I had given Edward full control over my accounts. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't signed a thing. When Catherine saw the documents, her eyes burned with fury. "This is forgery, Clara? Crude, but dangerous. They're trying to trap you." Edward, when confronted, went pale. "I swear I didn't know. I would never—" His voice broke. "I believe you," Catherine said firmly. "But belief isn't enough in court. We need proof." She devised a trap. With the bank's cooperation, she lured Britney into delivering another document. This time, everything was recorded. And in that recording, Britney's voice rang clear. "Don't worry, she'll never check. Put Edward's name. Make it look shaky. She's old. Sign it like this." The trial was brutal. Britney arrived in sleek black, her lawyer at her side. She painted herself as a dutiful daughter-in-law, concerned for her unstable mother-in-law. She disinherited her only son. Britney cried crocodile tears, smudging mascara. Now she wastes her fortune on strangers. Isn't that a sign of decline? But Catherine rose, voice sharp as steel. "Your Honor, we submit this recording. It reveals a conspiracy to commit fraud using forgery and deceit." The courtroom hushed. The recording played. Britney's voice, smug, unmistakable, filled the chamber. Gasps echoed. Edward lowered his head into his hands. Britney's lawyer paled. "It's fake," Britney screamed. "A montage." But the judge's eyes were hard as stone. For now, all contested documents are void. Clara retains full rights. He struck his gavel. I exhaled my chest light for the first time in months, but the true victory came not from the judge. It came from Edward. He rose, walked to the stand, and in a voice steady but heavy with guilt declared, "I am Clara's son." I was never aware of these documents, and I confess for too long I stayed silent while my wife tried to destroy my mother. I do not consent to this fraud. The words silenced the room. For the first time, I saw not the ambitious cold man molded by Britney, but my boy, the boy who used to run into my arms after school. Britney's face twisted, her red lips trembling. She turned her rage on him. Traitor. But her scream was just noise now. Edward had chosen light over shadow. The case dissolved. Britney fled the city chasing new lights and new prey. But her shadow lingered for months in gossip columns in whispers. Reporters harassed me. Neighbors left cruel notes. "You'll die alone," just like she said. One morning, I found Edward in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, planting hydrangeas. His hands were stained, his suit long discarded. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. "This place needs more green," he said without looking up. "And so do you, Mom." I stood watching him, the sunlight warming the tears on my cheeks. Slowly, painfully, he was becoming my son again. Time passed. Silver Circle grew. My mansion became the House of Candles, a haven for the elderly abandoned by their families. Each resident brought their own small flame, and together they lit the halls with warmth. Ruth practiced her breathing exercises on the veranda. Alma complained about my soulless sewing while mending cloth with her crooked but loving stitches. Jean played swing music, filling the sunroom with brass and laughter. And Edward helped watering roses, serving tea, pushing wheelchairs. His laughter, once rare, now mingled with theirs. One evening, he confessed, "I thought being your son was my right. Now I know it's work. Work paid not in money, but in clean conscience." I smiled, holding his hand. "That is the greatest inheritance I can leave you." Years later, at a community ceremony, I stood before hundreds. Cameras flashed, but I was no longer afraid of the gaze of strangers. They thought I was rich because of money. I said slowly, my voice steady, "But true wealth is here, in the laughter that fills this house, in the hands that clasp one another." Once I feared dying alone. Now I know solitude only comes when we close our doors. Today, I open mine. To all who need it. Applause thundered. In the crowd, Edward's eyes shone with tears, but his smile was proud. I do not know where Britney is now. Perhaps she's chasing mirrors somewhere, still mistaking reflections for love. I feel no hatred, only pity. Because I have found what she never will, a home, a son reborn, and a family chosen not by blood, but by heart. At night, when the wind stirs the chimes on the veranda, I close my eyes and whisper, "Arthur, you see, I did not die poor. I live surrounded by love." The chimes answer softly like his voice carried by the breeze. And in that sound, I know my story is not about loss, but about light. About the house that became a sanctuary. About a son who learned again to love. About a woman who refused to let dignity be stolen. If you hear my story, take a moment. Look around at your family, your friends, the strangers who once held out a hand. Ask yourself, do you love them for who they are, or only for what they give? Because the greatest inheritance is not money. It is the love we keep alive in our hearts.